All right, welcome everyone. My name is Dr. Sam Shea. I am a chiropractor and certified practitioner for the Institute for Functional Medicine, as well as a Kalish practitioner for the functional medicine practitioner trained by the Kalish Institute. And today we're going to be talking about a new revolutionary method to understanding your genes. Now, just to be clear, this is a genetic test as it relates to your health and well-being. It is not about it's not about what percentage Irish you are or whatever. It's just this is just specifically about how you can learn and understand your genes so you can have better longevity, better performance, better well-being. It's not a it's not going to be a typical genetics conference or seminar where we're going to be just chasing after an individual gene like this MTHFR, it's the worst gene ever. It's not like that at all. We're going to be looking at it from a meta level so you can better understand what's going on. More importantly, how you can practically implement it into your everyday life. So my presentation today is based off the ebook I recently published, which anyone you're watching is available to have for free. It's basically the notes to this webinar which you'll have. And my intention here is to create a Rosetta Stone for your genetics, because one of the things about genetics that's very difficult is that how overwhelming it is. There's so much information, and uh, ultimately, like, what is the point of it? Why even study it? And this webinar is going to explain how genetics is immediately practical to you for your goals, whether it's longevity, um, whether it's trying to get out of pain, or it's trying to drop weight, or it's trying to understand your diet, whatever it may be. And if you guys want this book, I'm going to post the link in the Facebook page, drsamshay.com/genetics. And you can also click on my banner there on Facebook as you see this. This ebook I dedicate to my departed mentor, Dr. John D'Onofrio. He was a very, very rare combination. A clinician, a master teacher, a brilliant innovator, and he just had the biggest heart in the world, and he had the best hugs on the planet. And he he turned he turned degrees into doctors. He taught tens of thousands of students, and I was lucky to be among them. And if you want to know more about Uncle John, you can go to my YouTube channel, just and put in Dr. D'Onofrio, and you'll see a 13-minute eulogy video where I said it's his three favorite Grateful Dead songs. And for those of you that wish to immortalize people who are close to you, I strongly recommend actually making a dedication video. Their favorite music, quotes, pictures of them, etc. It was quite a process for me. It helped me grieve, and it also helped me celebrate at the same time. Moving on. My intention about genetics is that we're 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 here to look at how to become optimal using genetics as a powerful guide. It's not for diagnosis of medical conditions. This is not looking for rare genetic diseases that you have this particular variation on this particular chromosome. It's not. This is not what we're looking at. We're looking at high-level functional analysis of genes. And if you're, this is the disclaimer page. Here it is, all the fine print. But this is a different type of approach to genetics, and we're approaching it from a functional standpoint. Functional means we're using the best of Western medicine diagnostics with the best of natural medicine lifestyle interventions. So we actually have the best of both worlds. And you can use testing, like genetic testing, to save yourself an enormous amount of time, money, and energy by getting right to the point. I mean, here is The father of functional medicine, Dr. Jeffrey Bland, lasting health comes from the interaction of our genes with our lifestyle and environment. Personalizing this connection is the future. There's a lot to unpack here in these two sentences. The interaction of our genes. So all lifestyle interventions you do have to be filtered through your individual set of genes. And if you have different genetic variations compared to someone else, then your response to environment and lifestyle can be very, very different. And which explains why people with the exact same lifestyles, can have two very different health expressions. It's because of their genes. And what that means is that for those that have unfortunate roles in their genetic lottery, they have to be much more attentive to lifestyle because they have less wiggle room to play with. Now, a lot of people are interested in life extension, stop the clock, human longevity, all sorts of these different buzzwords. And one of the absolute keystones is to understand your genetics. Like whether you want, vibrant energy, great skin, a sharp mind, a lean body, etc. Like you need to know your genetics. And one thing I'd like to caution everyone watching this is that genetics is not a magic bullet. Nothing is. And anyone who says, oh, you just got to take this one supplement and that will just solve all of your genetics, whatever. Here's your telomere extending WYSIWYG, whatever. That's not functional genetics. That's a Western medical mindset using a natural therapy as a pharmaceutical, philosophically. This is about the entire genetic pool. It's looking at everything from a big picture and looking at the totality of lifestyle changes as opposed to chasing after one magic bullet. Magic bullets are helpful, but only if they're in the context of absolutely everything else. So using a stop the clock method, it's the method I do. It's a unique concierge approach to customize your needs. Customized to your needs. So what that means is that we're not chasing an individual gene. We're looking at everything in context. And what who are the people that can benefit from genetics? And the answer is it depends on what your goals are. So, for example, people who are chronically unwell, for example, those that have chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia or autoimmune issues, if you understand your genetics and you can figure out, okay, where are the clusters of my inflammatory genes bunched up in not nice ways, and then what can I do based on my genetics in terms from lifestyle to change the expression of those inflammatory genes radically. If people are feeling normal, relatively symptom-free, or just want to cope or carry on, they're having a hard year, they're not aiming at anything really aspirational, they're just wanting to not slip backwards. Knowing your genetics will help you implement all the keystone lifestyle recommendations you need in order to maintain. And then for the aspirational health enthusiasts, the people who are entrepreneurs, biohackers, high performance, longevity, stop the clock, human potential, human longevity, etc., knowing genetics is absolutely keystone, because then what will happen is that you'll be able to really dial in all the things you need to do to optimize. Because in this level, it's about optimization. Here, it's about normalization, and here it's about crisis. And just genetics is helpful at every step of the way. And the good thing about genetics is that you can continue to incorporate more and more things and move yourself further up the scale. Now, there are some issues with doing, with kind of venturing on your own into this fraught world of functional medicine and functional genetics. And there's the challenges are many, like feeling overwhelmed. There's sick, overwhelmed with diets, feeling hungry all the time, sugar cravings. People struggle with gas, bloating, constipation, fatigues of all different types, inflammation that can manifest as weight, as pain, as swelling, as foggy brain. And then there's the problems like I had, trying to do it all on your own, not knowing where to start, having no map, being confused by all the different diets, unclear about what testing is needed, thinking that everything's about supplements, or just being bedazzled by the latest shiny podcast, TV show, summit, docu-series, or book, or whatever. And I was there too. And the whole reason that I got into this was because I was very sick and unwell and stressed out as a child, starting at age 6. And my parents' nuclear divorce, to which me and my sisters were, shall we say, caught in the blast radius, which developed into severe insomnia, gut issues, fatigue, 2 addictions, one to sugar, one to video games. Experienced a lot of bullying, humiliation, and violence in school, and was gaslit quite a lot. And also had chronic pain, and it was not great. And I had to go on this very, very long journey, going through multiple different systems of natural health after Western medicine absolutely failed me in terms of standard approaches to depression, anxiety, and yeah, it did not help. And so I went on this very long journey chasing uh, hundreds of magic bullets, and then realizing that I had to take a systems approach to it. And the main result of that is it's now my profession to help simplify people's journeys, cut their timeline down, cut the amount of time, energy, and money that they have to expend in order to get to the goals they want. Because I've already done all that. I've been on this pathway for a very, very, very long time. And the new vision is to help others through education, through frameworks and accurate testing, so that we are going based off the best of the science in terms of diagnostics, and then we use natural lifestyle interventions to get you to where you want to go to as healthy as possible. Now, in terms of genetics, for some people, we have to just the concept of genetics is a familiar sounding phrase, but I really want to just break it down so it's really easy to understand. A gene is basically a piece of the DNA. There's about 30,000 genes plus or minus, but the main analogy is a library. So the genome is where the DNA is kept is in the cell nucleus. It's in the library. So the library is the nucleus. The genes are organized into chromosomes, and so the chromosomes are the shelves. And then the books on the shelves are the bands in the chromosomes, and you can see it, in these little colored bands here. So those are the books, and then the genes themselves are the recipes in the book. So you take a book off the shelf and you lay it flat. You got a page here and a page here. That's a copy of the recipe for the gene from mom and one from dad. So a gene is a recipe that then codes for a protein. So again, DNA is in the library, the shelves in the library are the chromosomes, the books are the bands on the chromosome. You open the book, there's a recipe, those are the genes. And that's basically it. And yes, I was super happy to find this spiral staircase image of the library, like the spiral helix of the DNA. So the way that genetics works is that you've got you get copies from mom and copies from dad. Now, it gets a bit complicated, like mom and dad each have a copy, and then they duplicate, and then they split again into what are called gametes, and then they can just recombine as sperm and egg. And so this is how you can get, like, say, blue is the normal, or called wild type, and red is the variant. Variant's not the one we want. Variant is the one that's problematic. And you can see how you can have mom and dad can each have one copy of normal, one copy of the variant, and then through combination, you can end up with all the different types of combinations, a double variant or a so-called red dot, a single variant, one from mom, one from dad, or one from dad, one from mom. And it's a so-called yellow dot because you got one combination, one normal, one variant. Or you get the normal or wild type, which is 2 good copies. air quotes, good copies, which is the green. So we got this traffic light system of red, yellow, green, and uh, that's how genes recombine. And the intention behind it is to create variability in order to ensure survivability across multiple different changing environments. And that's why humans are able to live on all continents of the world. It's because we have this built-in adaptability. And when we're talking about how we're approaching genetics, we're approaching it from an aligned health model or a functional model. So I just want to distinguish here between the two paradigms of healthcare. So we've got the traditional model, Western medicine called allopathic medicine, called biomedicine, called traditional medicine, which is actually an utter misnomer. The traditional medicine is what's been around for thousands of years. Western medicine's been around for a couple hundred. So we'll just, it's traditional in air quotes. And it's based off of military medicine, where the symptom is the problem. So on the battlefield, people don't have bleeding eye disorder or missing arm disease. Those are acute emergencies that need immediate stabilization. And that model of crisis intervention is excellent in a crisis. The problem is when every single health condition is now catastrophized into a crisis or a crisis in waiting. So there's everything is a crisis. So you're like, or it's not a crisis until it's a crisis, and you're told it's all in your head. So it's this very binary experience in traditional and in Western medicine. It's based, as opposed to the aligned health model, it's about prevention and optimization. The traditional model is based off population statistics, where we are about precision, looking at the personal. There's a bell curve that's good for populational health, but an individual is somewhere on that bell curve, and you can't treat people like the top of the bell curve. That there are shades of gray that we have to look for in personal and precision-based care. Traditional model is kind of top-down, where I am the leading authority and I'm telling you, dictating to you what to do, versus a service model where there's a collaboration and coaching, as opposed to prescribing. That traditional models break down and repair, versus we're looking at enhancement, recalibration, optimization. You're put into a victim mindset with the traditional model, whereas we're an empowered and collaborative state of mind. You're patient in the traditional model versus a participant. That were, in traditional model, it's more ignores a tricky word. It's more. I've had the experience of having things being ignored when I went into a Western medical standpoint situation, and as opposed to looking at the numbers from a gray space, as opposed to, well, you have it or you don't. It's looking at the data from, okay, where is this going, and is it on its way towards something good or ill? So it's using lab tests in a predictive model as opposed to binary. We either have it or we ignore it. General personalized, mechanism holistic, symptom, root cause, passively watched, you get it. I've taken this same model and applied it to genetics. So in Western genetics, they're chasing individual genes. And whereas we're looking at clusters of genes, they're looking for the pathology of genes, like, oh, you have this gene combo, that means you're going to get this disease, as opposed to looking at the function. So pathology would be, you're going to have cancer, diabetes, stroke, heart disease, whatever, autoimmune or whatever. This is looking not at diseases, it's looking at your inflammation pathways, your free radical pathways, liver detox, vitamin D utilization, methylation, cardiovascular circulation, fat and energy metabolism, your carb tolerance, and so on. Like, it's looking at not diseases, but it's looking at all the processes that trigger disease, quote unquote disease genes. The disease genes are down here. The processes like inflammation, free radicals, etc., they're all up here. They're meta. They're above it. Not to say that disease genes aren't important, but from this standpoint of genetics, we're looking above that. From Western genetics, there's black and white thinking. Here we look at the gray space, the shades of gray, like there's many dots on the journey towards chronic inflammation. The focus on disease in Western versus the drivers of disease, a sense of helplessness and pessimism versus hope and optimism, and then giving you symptomatic relief with drugs, etc. in Western genetics versus lifestyle changes, which is epigenetics and the functional genetics side of it. So with genetics, your genes will always be the same, but their expression can change. I mean, this is good news. This is how, I mean, we can know this instinctually. We look at, take two twins. We give one, they exercise, they sleep, they have clean organic food, they have great relationships, they take care of themselves. And then you have the other twin who's on a stressed out fast food diet that's sleep deprived, surrounded by toxic workspace and people. Exact same genes, two totally different health expressions. So that's epigenetics. And even if you have a red dot, two bad copies, you'll notice that your expression can can drift into the greenish area. No matter how good your lifestyle is, this red dot will never be green, but you can make it behave more green-like. So too, if you have a green dot and you just lucked out that way, you can still behave, your gene can still behave red-like if your lifestyle is bad enough. It's just where your starting block is and what your your outer boundaries are of what you can do is determined by your genetics. Everyone has a particular genetic playing field. There's boundaries, and it's not wise to cross them. And in genetics, we're not worried about limitations. They're just boundaries so that we can work within the framework we have. I met a classical Indian flutist, or I think it's pronounced flautist. I don't, all the musicians listening, please forgive me. Um, he had this wonderful analogy for explaining a raga. A raga is a rhythm or a style of music within that tradition. And he says there's thousands of ragas, and one can only master, I think he said about a dozen in one's lifetime. And he described a raga as a cage, and that you must learn how to fly within the cage. And your genetics is your cage, and so we're going to learn how to help you fly within the cage. Here is a kind of a stark, research paper from Weighing It Up, Obesity in Australia, that genetics contributes to 70% of whether or not you're obese or not, and lifestyle is 30%. And we're going to cover that in a bit more detail of the 3 different types of weight gain that are based on your genes. This is another explanation of understanding like the difference between life expectancy versus health expectancy. So life expectancy is when, all the way up to a debilitating disease state. So after that, health expectancy is up to the debilitating disease state. Life expectancy is that point up to death. So what we're wanting to do is look at how can we expand your health expectancy, not just mere life expectancy. And genes are the keystone to do that. One other kind of salient point is that the #1 cause of bankruptcy in the United States is medical expenses. So one of the best investments you can do right now is testing-based lifestyle interventions and lifestyle changes. This is the single best investment you can ever do in your life, because everything else about you enjoying your life, whether it's your creative life, your family life, your social life, if you're involved in charities or starting businesses, or you're wanting to travel, or any of these things, whatever, care for others, care for pets, it's all predicated on your health, well-being, and state of body. And the #1 investment you can do is into functional testing and functional genetics to ensure that no matter what you do, you live a long and healthy life and not burden yourself with, predictable medical expenses if you don't take care of yourself. Now, there are many genetics tests out there. I call it the dubious promise of 23andMe. Frankly, when I've worked with people who've had 23andMe and Ancestry, they've been made all sorts of promises about how easy it's going to be and the lifestyle nutrition things are going to be straightforward. Just plug it into this little app, it'll be great. The reality is it's overwhelming. It's not prioritized. There's really no help implementing it. It's alarmist, and you're treated like an algorithm, not a person. The solution to that is this comprehensive concierge genetics testing. So these are the 5 tests that I run together as one lab package. These tests changed my life and have changed the lives of my clients. And by going through each of these tests, you'll see how the functional medicine approach is very logical and very practical, and you can see the benefits and how can immediately relate to your situation. So when we're picking, there's 30,000 or so genes. How do you know which genes to pick to look at? Well, there's 4 main criteria to look at. One is which genes influence the main drivers of all disease: inflammation, cell defense, which includes free radicals and liver detox, your ability to absorb and utilize vitamin D, methylation, cardiovascular health, and fat and cholesterol metabolism. So that just pushes thousands of those genes off the table. Then you ask, of the remaining genes, which are the upstream genes that are the generals that control the downstream genes. So there's hundreds of inflammatory genes that are related to inflammation directly or indirectly. But what are the top, 15 or so that actually influence the hundreds and hundreds below, which then in turn influences thousands and thousands and thousands of genes under them? Then you want to find, of those, which genes have at least 10% variance in the general population, meaning you don't want to test for a gene that will have a 0.000001% of having a variant red gene that you're hardly ever going to see in your entire lifetime. You want to check for genes that have meaningful variations in the population. And then lastly, you want genes that have been researched in peer-reviewed top-tier journals done on humans, not guinea pigs, wombats, nematodes, or whatever, that lifestyle, exercise, diet, nutrition alone can change the epigenetic expression, this traffic light system. So you want your genetics test to have these groupings, and that's the genetics test that I do. And you look for groupings. And so we're not chasing after an individual gene here. We're looking at clusters. Now, without knowing anything about these numbers or these strange, these strange letters, etc. Just look at the clustering here. And without knowing anything at all about the specifics of these genes or these numbers, not a thing, who is better off? This person with this big cluster of green dots, or this person with this big cluster of red and yellow dots? Okay, and the answer is pretty clear. This has to do with cardiovascular health and blood pressure. In fact, this person may be tendency to lower blood pressure because their control of blood pressure is so good. This person has a very high tendency to high blood pressure. You can see it's just clustering all around here. Now, this is what we're looking for. Now, is the clustering. Now, if we were just chasing, say, the AGT gene here, and we ignored all the rest of this, oh, yellow dot, oh my God, this person's in so much trouble, they have a yellow dot. Well, not really, because when you look at what's surrounding it, it's actually not a big deal from a 30,000-foot view. And then if we're just looking at the NADPH CY, beta alpha, gene here, and we're just looking at this gene, green dot, oh, this guy must have great cardiovascular health. Not true, because we're looking at the patterns and the themes of the gene clusters, not chasing an individual gene. It's like a song. You don't rate a song on one note. You got to listen to the notes in the context of everything else, of all the other notes. So here's the top. The number one priority in looking at genetics when it comes to health is really inflammation. That's the really big process that influences all the other processes in regards to health. Now, some people are like, oh my God, inflammation is bad, we have to get rid of it. Well, not really. Inflammation is yin-yang. Too much is bad, too little is also bad. The whole point of inflammation is to protect you from damage and infection. So as in hunter-gatherer days, if we're going to go out and try to bring down a giant animal that has hooves, teeth, horns, and claws, potentially, or claws, and you're going to hunt them with a tiny stick, you're very likely to get trampled, gored, mauled, or bitten. And when you're bit or clawed, you have two things happen. One is you have tissue damage. Number two, you have infections injected into that open wound from said fangs, claws, etc. And the role of inflammation is to rush in there and quickly kill off the infections that were introduced and to bring blood to repair the damaged tissue. That is the point of inflammation. We need it. So, I mean, look, I have one of the worst genetic roles when it comes to inflammation I've seen of any of the clients I've ever run this on. Now, why would nature allow someone to be so over and have such an exuberant inflammatory response? Well, if I was taken back in time to hunter-gatherer days, and me and my hunting party were out there, and we got injured, I would be the one most likely to survive because I had the most exuberant inflammation response to a bite, whereas other people would have a less survivability. Now the problem is that in a non-hunter-gatherer state where I'm not undergoing, bite injuries or whatever, the inflammation genes that I have can overreact to other things that trigger inflammation, like bad food, toxic chemicals, even sleep deprivation, stress. So the advantage of having an exuberant inflammatory genetic lottery, like I do, is that I am more likely to survive short-term damage from accidents or injuries, but it will sacrifice long-term health because the inflammation can wear me down. So that's why inflammation is not intrinsically bad. It's just about how it's applied and to what degree and in what situation. So I don't want to make inflammation the enemy here. I want to help people understand, because it's very easy to look at one's genetics like I did and just think, oh my, the universe is uniquely cruel to me now. Like I was uniquely cursed with this genetic lottery. And, it's about trade-offs. And it kind of brought about, me understanding the actual inflammation brought real peace, about my genes, like, okay, I can understand why I have this. And it is advantageous in certain situations. So there's a couple things about inflammation. There's the initiation of it. Some people are overly aggressive in their initiation of inflammation. Instead of a little Bic lighter, it's actually a giant inferno. Or people have trouble with perpetuating. It just becomes this long, slow burn. Like they perpetuate the inflammation, or they have problems putting it out. They don't have fire hoses. Instead, they have squirt guns. And this is a real case of mine. The woman here has, you can see the clusterings here. Now this is the actual portion. This is a portion, the first 15 of the 64 genes that Achieve Your Natural Weight test looks at. This is 15 of those 64 genes. The first 15 genes are about inflammation, and you can see the clusters here: the overinitiation, oversustaining, and underclearing. Now, in her situation, what happened was that she got a new physical trainer who was of the CrossFit persuasion of let's work you out every day into the ground. And what happened is she didn't lose weight; she actually gained weight. Her muscles washed out. Not only that, but her hormone system went off. Her menstrual cycle went completely out of whack. And she called me. She's like, what's going on here? I'm gaining weight. I'm feeling worse. Everything is all off track. And so we looked at her genes and we figured out what's going on. So number one, where, I mean, this is part of the achieve your natural weight, and this is an example of inflammatory water weight. So this gene test will tell you if you're genetically vulnerable to inflammatory water weight gain, hormonal toxic weight gain, or caloric fat weight gain, or some combination. The most common thing that I see is inflammatory water weight, not caloric weight. Most people, I mean, just to really put a fine point on it, I mean, how many of you know people who eat, a little muffin and they gain 4 pounds? Now, unless that muffin was last year's Christmas fruitcake, it didn't weigh 4 pounds. But what did happen is that little muffin triggered so much inflammation that your body retained 4 pounds worth of water in order to dilute the toxic inflammatory chemicals that are very damaging to cells, dilute them down to buy the liver time to filter them out. That's why you swell up with water. And that's why little cupcake, little muffin, whatever, can make you swell. So most people I find who struggle with weight, whether it's through food or no matter how much exercise they do, or whatever else, almost always it's about inflammatory water weight. The hormonal toxic weight, that's a separate issue about looking at the liver genes and the detox pathways, particularly the ability to detox estrogen. And then the caloric fat weight is about calories. Like calories in, do you keep and retain and store them as fat, and do you find it difficult to burn fat for fuel or for heat? So the paradox of fat loss is that people can try all these strategies, starving themselves, exercising more, eating tinier bits, but it turned out to backfire. This is where the inflammatory piece comes in. So with her, she over-initiated, over-sustained inflammation undercleared, and then she also had estrogen circulating her body, and so inflammation plus estrogen-dosed fat equals belly fat, and the belly fat increases inflammation, which then creates this vicious cycle. So with her, we looked at all of her genes, and then also these are her liver genes, and you'll see, like, you don't have to read all this fine print and everything. Ignore all that. Just look at, I conveniently circled the yellow dots for you. What is in common? Estrogen, 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 inflammation. So here's what happened. She got way overinflamed because she exercised too much. If you over-exercise, you'll tip the balance and begin to overinflame. That's the issue. So she tipped the balance. Now her liver got preoccupied with dealing with the inflammation. So what's more urgent for the liver? Dealing with all this inflammation or dealing with some hormones that are floating around? And the answer is the inflammation. So her liver got overwhelmed and wasn't able to properly regulate her hormone levels, and that's why her cycles went off. And it is a bit more complex, than this and this. It's actually like this. This is the first 37 genes of the 60+ gene profile, and it's a combination of inflammation, free radicals, in her case liver, and some methylation genes as well. We're not going to go into that level of detail. But what we did is that we found the fewest number of lifestyle changes that will beneficially help the most important genes. All of this based on the scientific research. It's all based on those peer-reviewed studies that show this lifestyle change alone is enough to shift that genetic expression more towards the green side of the behavior. And so this is an example of part of the chart that I gave her based on the research of what is the most important things that she can do. So in her case, of her first 37 genes, which included inflammation, free radicals, liver, and methylation, 23 of those were red and yellow dots. Then I found this nutrient, in her case, so don't copy this down or anything. This is in her particular case. This one nutrient helped 14 of those 23 red and yellow dots behave more green-like. That's over half. Avoiding smoking, both passive and active. That includes pollution. Helped 14 out of those 23 red and yellow dots. That's over half. Superoxide dismutase. Again, it's complicated, but it's a class of nutrients. Don't worry about it. Don't look it up just now. 11 out of 23. That's almost half. And you can see all of these interventions. So she doesn't need to do many things to beneficially shift those genes. And you can see avoid overtraining is actually in there, right there. Avoid overtraining. She was overtraining, triggering inflammation. So that's the achieve your natural weight. And so when you cut down on the exercise down to something reasonable, like 2 days a week, not 5 or 6, and doing all the lifestyle recommendations I recommended, her muscle tone returned, her weight normalized, her cycles normalized. So this is what you can do with this particular test. Now, there's more things you can do with it. We're just focused on weight, but this test is also the main stop the clock of the effects of aging test. It's also longevity, health, and well-being test. It's also the future-proof your brain test, because what are the things that are going to affect your brain? Inflammation, free radicals, toxicity, vitamin D utilization, all these things. So this is the kind of the bigger chunks of the test out of these 5. So now there's 4 others that really synergize. One is the Find Your Ideal Diet test, and this helps you find if you're a keto, paleo, Mediterranean, or high carb. This test absolutely changed my life. I turned out, even though I had a perfect Portlandia Mediterranean diet, I was still having terrible digestive problems, even though I've been teaching nutrition for over 10 years at that point. And then I ran the test and realized that I was a 2 out of 20 of carb tolerance. So what happens is that we're not looking at variations of red and yellow green dots. We're looking at duplicates. So this is a gene that looks at this is a gene that makes the enzyme that breaks down starches. And if I have duplicates of this gene, then I put out a huge amount more volume of this enzyme. But if I have very few, like I do, then I can't really digest starch very well. So I have a 2 out of 20. So I'm the second lowest carb tolerance possible. So I'm basically kind of an Eskimo. And it makes sense because my genealogy from both sides of my family is Northern Russian. So there's not, that's cold up there. There's not a lot of grains growing up in that area. So it makes sense why I have a low carb tolerance. And so for me, I'm more in I straddle like the keto, paleo. 1s are definitely keto people. 2s are kind of in between. 3s and 4s are paleo, and so on. So this ideal diet test is absolutely incredible because it utterly changed my life. Just within 1 week, of changing my diet to my genetic capacity for carbs, my digestive problems went away. Okay, I am way, 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 way happier on this particular diet, and I don't, feel the urge to snack. I'm not like anxious and jittery like I was on the other higher carb diets. And some people are low carb and some people are not. And the people that are out there saying everyone's got to be paleo, that's just wrong, because we now have testing to see who is paleo and who is not, and who is Mediterranean, who's high carb, etc. High carb people do exist. They do. Not a lot, but they do. And it was very humbling to realize the genetic testing can reveal that. The next genetic test is understand your trigger foods. Now, this one also changed my life. It looks at the 5 primary food substances commonly found in the Western diet: gluten, lactose, alcohol, caffeine, and salt. I tongue-in-cheek refer to them as the 5 food groups. Gluten, dairy, alcohol, caffeine, and salt, 5 food groups. And there's because they're so prevalent, we have to ask ourselves, what is our relationship to these foods genetically? So will coffee induce anxiety or depression? That happens. And I'll show you how it happens, because it happens to me. Am I at risk for alcoholism? Am I lactose intolerant? Am I gluten intolerant and at risk for celiac disease, which is a terrible digestive disease? And will salt likely raise my blood pressure? So for me, 80%, what I find in practice is that 80% of the time, at least one of these 5 things, will have a meaningful, life-changing result. So for me, it was coffee. I was a red dot in coffee. I get anxious and then depressed if I have too much caffeine. Now, I was in utter denial about this because I had the most bulletproof coffee ever, coconut oil plus coconut milk and cinnamon and clove and cardamom and I put in a licorice root and all, like, just I made this like liver. I had like 12 to 15 different things in it. It was like the most bulletproofiest coffee ever, you know. And I would still be anxious 1 to 2 hours later, but I was in denial because that was supposed to be healthy. And the reality was is that when I got this test, I sat down and really did a retrospective, and then I also tested it. That yes, coffee really messes me up, and I'm one of the unfortunate few that coffee makes things worse for me. And not everyone. Some people are fine and they can enjoy all the bulletproof coffee they want. You know, I'm saying that tongue in cheek, of course. But it's caffeine is not good for me. I can kind of mitigate it with really high quality decaffeinated organic uh, coffee that's through the Swiss water method, but that's getting a level of nuance. But like, because I love the flavor of coffee. But you know, the bottom line is that 80% of the time, this test has one very meaningful finding that changes their diet forever. For me, it happened to be caffeine. For others, it's other things like alcohol or lactose or gluten or even salt. Then we have the vitamin D absorption. This is really important in today's day and age. As we know, most people who end up on ventilators are deficient in vitamin D. That's Rhonda Patrick's research. I think she says like 98% or 90+%, I can't remember, of people who end up on ventilators from a pandemic have very deficient vitamin D. So taking vitamin D isn't enough. That's the misunderstanding. It's actually absorbing it. Getting it into the blood is not enough. Actually, getting into the cells is where you want it, and it has to do with the receptors, the VDR, vitamin D receptors. That is the most important. So if you have vitamin D floating around, you need to have the receptor on the surface of the cell to grab it and bring it into the cell. Now, vitamin D controls about 3 to 5% of the human genome, primarily as it relates to immunity and inflammation. So it makes total sense why, if this particular pandemic is having a very strong inflammatory response, say in the lungs, it really would be problematic to be very deficient in vitamin D. And having it just in the blood isn't enough. You need to be able to absorb it. And when you find out which genes, if you're red dots like me, like this test changed my life because I have red dots in my vitamin D absorption. So I can't just take vitamin D. I have to take other things to help generate out the vitamin D receptor. So and also, for some people like me, I can't get vitamin D that easily from sunlight. So I have to get it from food and supplements. So there's a lot here in the vitamin D test, vitamin D absorption test. Then lastly, we have the immunity support genes. Again, really important in these times to know which genes are specifically relevant to your immunity. And then all the lifestyle changes, again, through the peer-reviewed journals done on humans to see what lifestyle changes are going to best help you. So this is the good news is that when I got this report, it's recently implemented. Most of the things that we're doing based on the prior genetics tests and my prior studies, I had already been implementing. But it was a good reminder about how important these things are especially in pandemic times. So those are the 5 genetics lab packages, and achieve your natural weight, which also counts as the longevity, stop the clock, future-proof your brain, the ideal diet, which is the carb tolerance test, the 5 trigger foods, the vitamin D absorption, and then the immunity genes. And so what people get for your investment is the confidence to know that you're getting, your personalized and customized and prioritized list of what to do. The mini version is this. There's many more things that you'll be given, as well as specific recommendations based on the other labs as well. The investment covers the test kits, the labs analysis, my professional time, the reports, my analysis, the customized checklists, follow-up time. And unlike functional tests, you don't need to repeat genetics tests because your genes don't change. I mean, unless you're wanting to test for other genes. I mean, I'm not sure why, because these are the main keystone genes that we should be concerned with. but amortized over 20 years, whatever you invest in your genetics test now is going to pay dividends of dividends later on. So what you walk away with is your genetic-based diet with recipes, a weekly planner, and shopping lists, clarity on what diet is genetically best for you, keto, paleo, Mediterranean, high carb, how to handle higher carb events when you are traveling or birthday parties, customize and prioritize lifestyle recommendations, how to manage your trigger foods, how to best absorb and use vitamin D for your unique situation, how to support your immunity genes, how to reduce inflammation, as well as deal with the detox pathways, free radicals, methylation, cardiovascular, and fat metabolism. So closing thoughts, genetic testing is one of the more recent tools available to help you identify your ideal diet, achieve your natural weight, stop the clock, and to support you in your health expectancy, not just life expectancy. And the benefit of technology we have today is that we can test now as opposed to guessing. And I really, really encourage you to invest in yourself today by getting genetic testing. So I'm going to put here, you've got the order link to actually get the genetics lab package. And if you still have questions, you can schedule a 15-minute call with me if you go to drsamshay.com/contact.